Good morning. This is Doreen with ThoughtStorm Journal. A lot of people on the planet are giving up hope. They think the world and everyone in it has gone completely crazy. And when you look everywhere around you, it's hard to argue with that. But there's something else to consider here. If we listen to anyone who's worked their way to a higher state of consciousness, they'll always tell you that there's a lot of turmoil along the way. And if you look carefully, you see that this kind of turmoil is what we're dealing with right now in the world. We are experiencing a shift in consciousness. We look around ourselves on TV, the internet, social media, politics, society in general. Everyone's at odds. Everyone's more determined than ever to be right and is willing to fight like wildcats to prove it. At any given moment, we find a tragedy somewhere unfolding in front of us. And to add fuel to the fire, we all fight about what caused it. No one can agree, and everyone is pointing fingers at everyone else as being the reason for the problems and the reason we're all so divided. Our trusted institutions are breaking down and being exposed for massive deception and some of the most evil and heinous acts imaginable. And the earth itself is undergoing massive physical changes that we can all see and feel. And make no mistake about it, it's scary as hell. It feels at times like the world is coming to an end and that there really is no hope. And rather than looking at solutions, we're all ironically looking to leaders we now know we can't necessarily trust to fix them. We're all looking for someone to blame for everything and all the division between us. But there is no one person or thing causing the division. And all this chaos has been brewing for years. But I want to tell you something important that you might not readily believe. That's okay. But what's happening right now that's scaring many people nearly half to death is actually what may need to happen for the good of humankind and planet Earth. We as a collective are embarking on an amazing journey, and I'm going to explain why. First, think about any time in your life in which you experienced a big transition, such as sudden death in your family or some other kind of wrenching change. Remember how all the changes associated with that event felt like. In those times, since you were moving into uncharted territory, you probably experienced emotional and psychological turmoil. And if it was jarring and traumatic enough, you may have even experienced physical symptoms. And if there were other people involved, you may have experienced tension, disagreements, and even out-and-out conflict with those around you. Now imagine that kind of transition on a global scale. The time we're living in right now is an unprecedented time. The Earth is shifting as it moves through the cosmos. And as it moves through the galaxy, it encounters different types of energy along its path. And we ourselves also experience these changes in energy. We, in our existence on this planet, are making a transition along with the planet, as we're also transitioning from one cosmological age into another. And the energy of this new age is vastly different from the one we're leaving. We're currently moving out of the age of Pisces and into the age of Aquarius. And this has been going on for years now. We all know that something's changing. We can all feel it. And it can be very uncomfortable at times, especially when we really don't understand what the hell's going on. As our solar system moves through the galaxy, every 2100 years or so, we slip into a new age as the vernal equinox changes. And with this change, the energies we're all exposed to bring about a change in our consciousness. These energies that we're exposed to can pull us or push us into moving and or changing. They can make us feel angry, confused, and anxious. They can affect us physically, spiritually, emotionally, and psychologically. But this change from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius is particularly jarring because the age of Pisces has been a particularly dark and foreboding age. A lot of things have been kept hidden, and people have been far too trusting of our authority figures. And the human race, as well as the planet itself, has paid the price. But now, as we enter the age of Aquarius, things are changing drastically. As we're all horrified at times, what's actually happening is, as we're leaving the age in which things were hidden, things are now being uncovered. Evils are being exposed, and atrocities toward the planet and humanity are now coming out into the open. And humans, who've basically been under a kind of psychic hypnosis for centuries, are starting to wake up. And they're starting to really see what's going on in their world. And now that we really see it, we're all in a kind of collective shock. Now, some people will not awaken at all. They won't be able to handle it, and they'll cling to the old ways. But those who are awakening may viciously disagree about what the real problems are and about how to fix them. You can see this unfolding with all the discourse in social, political, and spiritual shifts around the world. It makes every moment of every day feel like we're at the brink of world war and disaster because people are so angry and frustrated and anxious. This is because this shift in the cosmos, this massive change in consciousness, has turned the heat way up on all of us. We are at the proverbial tipping point, and I dare say it will get worse. But I also must say we have a lot of reasons to hold on to hope and a lot of reasons to believe that this storm will, over time, begin to calm down. This is a massive awakening that we're all experiencing, and there is a process here that has to take place. But what does it mean? What is an awakening, really? It's a coming into awareness. And awakening or awareness is a building block to a more enlightened state of being, for lack of a better term. When you suddenly awaken and become aware of something, it means that you finally see it. And once you see something, you can't unsee it. This is your consciousness, and that state of consciousness at that point is forever changed. Psychiatrists and psychologists and spiritual gurus see this all the time. Once the students or patients become more conscious of their own truth, there is no way they can go back to the way things were before. Once they understand the negative aspect in their own personal truth, they have to do something about it. There's no way around it. When they weren't fully aware of the problem, it was easy for them to ignore it or sweep it under the rug. But now that they see it, they have no choice but to address it. In fact, the idea behind practices like psychotherapy and spiritual awakening is to make the unconscious aspects of our being conscious. This is what leads to a more awakened state. And this can happen with the collective as well as an individual. But the problem with it happening to the collective is that every member in that collective will perceive the events unfolding in front of them differently. And this will cause conflict. They'll all reach a crossroads, and depending on their perceptions of events, some will go one way while others will go the other way. But as everyone becomes more awakened, they're systematically forced to reset their priorities and redefine who they are. So there's this extremely volatile, violent, tumultuous, and stressful period in which everyone's jostling, trying to find their new definition and their new role in the world in the midst of total confusion. And this is where we are right now. Imagine an isolated group of people have just experienced some kind of disaster in which all they knew has been destroyed. First, there's a period of disbelief, like they can't wrap their minds around what happened. Then, after a time, they begin to accept what's happening, but then they realize that nothing is the same anymore. So they have to restructure their lives under the new paradigm. They have no choice, and change is never easy. People have a hard time with it, and the stress can be overwhelming because everyone's grappling in the dark, trying to find themselves. They're completely stressed out and lashing out at each other, blaming each other, and ultimately threatening to kill each other. This is what we see in the world right now. But remember, at some point, people do get tired of conflict. They eventually realize that they are in this together, and the only way they can survive is to get along. And that's what we all need to remember right now. All the people in that isolated group experienced the same disaster. They were really having the same experience. They were just each perceiving it differently. We all need to understand that we're all having the same experience. We all just see it differently. The world is not ending. This is a new beginning. But there will be turmoil and conflict before we fully come to that realization. Right now, we're all being exposed to all kinds of extremes by the universe. And those extremes are forcing us to decide what kind of world we want to live in. And the best possible outcome is that it will force us to start taking a long look at ourselves and really see our similarities instead of our differences. We can make a positive difference if we realize our common ground and realize that we're all connected. We can end the conflict, but we have to actually see what's happening. Once we see it, we can't unsee it. And that's when the biggest shifts occur. There is absolutely nothing to fear. We only need to be aware of what's happening to us and understand the process that has to unfold and allow it to unfold while fully understanding its purpose. And then we all need to move toward unity. This won't happen overnight, but it will happen if we start to understand.